This is Law of Attraction Explored. I'm Tim Grimes. If you'd like a free guide that explains the hidden link between relaxation and the law of attraction, or if you want more information about my books or my coaching, you can visit radicalcounselor.com. Enjoy the episode. So I just wanted to let you know that the podcast is going to be going on a short hiatus. I mentioned a couple episodes ago that I found that YouTube is often a far easier way for me to share content about these principles, and that while I absolutely love this podcast, at this point we've covered so many different subjects and really explored many different approaches to these manifesting ideas that I think are helpful and the kind of episodes that you can listen to many times and get something new out of each time. So in the future, I'm planning on making this podcast more infrequent than it has been, meaning that usually we have an episode a week, and I think that's probably going to go down to more like an episode a month or so. As I've said many times, and as I just said, these are the kind of episodes that you can listen to several times. And especially if you're new to this podcast, you really can start near the beginning of it and just go through and listen to each episode or each episode that interests you and get a very good overview of some of the main figures in the American Law of Attraction movement over the last 100 or so years. Because, in general, most of these teachers are so underappreciated, and we really can get something new out of their advice by hearing it and exploring it. I personally have noticed that it seems as if people are much more interested in finding out about this information on YouTube than on a podcast. I think that part of that is just the social media element, and I'm not sure that people on YouTube in general are getting as much out of the information as people are when they listen to a podcast about these subjects. But nonetheless, YouTube is a great place to just share this information because it's such an open medium for it right now. So I've been putting a lot of videos up on YouTube, and I think that, if you enjoy this podcast, there's a good chance that you'll enjoy a lot of the videos I put up. I'm much more informal, much more my everyday self on those videos, which some people prefer. But this podcast lends itself to kind of a meditative quality, which I really love, and really lines up with a lot of the coaching and counseling I do with people. And so I plan to continue at least having the occasional episode. So today I thought that we could continue with a little bit more from Joel Goldsmith. As I mentioned recently, I've gotten back into Goldsmith's teachings after taking a rather long break. I think I first read Goldsmith back in 2016, and really only this recently, the last few months, have I gotten back into Goldsmith's work. Like most of these law of attraction teachings, I see plenty of things that I disagree with that Goldsmith says, but again, that's completely fine. There's going to be plenty of stuff that we disagree with when we come across these law of attraction teachings, and that doesn't mean that we can't get something immensely valuable and profound out of them. I'm going to read a little bit more from Joel Goldsmith's book, Invisible Supply. I just think this is a really great book. And the idea of supply, the idea that God is supply, is something we hear so often in law of attraction circles. And I've come across very few books that explain it as well as Goldsmith does here. So without further ado, let me just read a few passages with the understanding that supply does not necessarily just mean money. Supply, of course, means wealth in all ways. So supply can mean better relationships, better health, a better living situation, a better job situation, as well as a better financial situation. Supply means all these things. Goldsmith is one of the deep thinkers of the last 100 years when it comes to these law of attraction teachings. And you're going to see that when he talks about God is supply, he really means it. So he writes here, "The error of most religious teachings is in the belief that supply is something that comes to us, and a great deal of time is wasted in praying for it to be given to us. We know that such spiritual qualities as integrity, loyalty, morality, honesty, and charity are embodied in our consciousness. We do not pray for these qualities to be added to us. They are qualities that we express. Whether or not we express them to the fullest of our understanding is another question. Supply is just as spiritual as such qualities. It too is not something that comes to us. It is embodied within us, and we must express it. This we do by casting our bread upon the waters, and it comes back to us as our supply. This is the only supply to which we are spiritually entitled. This is a very profound take on this idea, this concept that God is supply. Goldsmith is saying that supply is literally a quality within you. In other words, you already have it. Yet our failure to recognize the supply, the health, the wealth, the peace that we have within us is the cause of a lot of our troubles and anxiety and despair. But your health, your wealth, your peace, your prosperity is something you bring out of yourself. Later on, he writes, our supply is in direct proportion to our receptivity. This is, again, a really direct and deep way of looking at this concept. Let me read a little bit more of what Goldsmith wrote in regards to that. He said, "To me, the highest expression of gratitude is the realization that God is the invisible source of all that is visible, and that He is responsible for all of the good on this earth and all the other planets. I doubt that I could ever bring myself to thank God for anything that I have or that comes to me, probably because I do not believe in a God who provides only for me or sends only to me. I do not believe God created sunshine or rain or the cattle on 1,000 hills especially for me. I believe that all of these exist as God's expression of His own infinite being, of His own infinite abundance, spread forth for all the sons and daughters of God, and not only for a favored few. Being grateful for the fish in the sea, the birds in the air, the cattle on 1,000 hills, the trees that bloom, for all that we witness from waking until sleeping, for the fact that the principle of life is at work for us even while we are sleeping, is to me the highest form of gratitude, because there is nothing personal in it. It is a sense of gratitude that the infinity of God is omnipresent for all of us to share. The fact that so few receive from this infinite abundance has nothing at all to do with God. There is no favoritism on the part of God. God does not give more to one than to another. God has no favorite children, no favorite race, no favorite nation, nor does God reward the virtuous and punish the sinful. It is difficult to accept the doctrine of God's rewarding the virtuous and punishing the sinful when one sees so many sweet, virtuous people suffering disease or lack, while so many rascals abound in health and supply. Our supply is in direct proportion to our receptivity. That is, the degree of gratitude that we express, the degree of bread that we place upon the waters in the form of benevolence, forgiveness, praying for our enemies, and so forth, demonstrates our receptivity, because then we are expressing the spiritual principle of supply. So this spiritual principle of supply is something that we really can't even articulate. And that's why it's so powerful. And it comes back to what we always talk about, recognizing God in this moment. Again, Goldsmith says, "To me, the highest expression of gratitude is the realization that God is the invisible source of all that is visible, and that He is responsible for all of the good on this earth." And then Goldsmith says that our supply is in direct proportion to our receptivity of this truth. And this truth is always here, right now, moment to moment.